Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Happy Thursday. Welcome back to GovConHacks podcast, where we give you actionable tips in government contracting. I'm joined with my co-host, Natasha Velez, and a very special guest, Miss Tammy Hester with AIA Healthcare. Tammy, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. I am Tammy Hester. I have been doing healthcare contracting with various federal agencies, and I'd be dating myself, but hitting that 20-year mark
Oh, Tammy, we lost your audio.
within the federal government. So any healthcare staffing needs, we go after it, we bid on it, and hopefully win and staff.
Awesome.
That is awesome. So, AIA Healthcare, for those of us watching who might be new, AIA Healthcare is not a small business. They are considered other than small, but I'm sure that, every big business started as a small business somewhere. So, you've been doing this for a long time. Tell us a little bit about sort of what your role is like. I mean, we have a lot of small businesses in the audience. Some of them are new. Some of them have been doing this a while, hitting brick walls with large healthcare providers. So tell us kind of what you're looking for in these partners and what your role is so that the audience can kind of resonate.
Sure. So at IA, I focus primarily on federal, state, and local contracts with various agencies. And within those contracts, we're required to bid on probably the majority of opportunities that we go after on the federal level require for us to have a small business partner. So we're always looking for companies that are active and actively providing healthcare staffing services. We're looking for companies that have small business designations with the SBA, whether it's woman-owned, SDVOSB, 8A, any of those designations. And we look to establish partnerships so that we can potentially bid on opportunities that might be in a small business lane. As a large business, we are also required to fulfill small business requirements. So we look for small businesses, again, that are active, that are currently working, have all of the requirements under all the various FAR regulations, whether it's the insurance or the SCA guideline pricing. We look to work with those companies.
Oh.
So I have a ton of questions, but when you say you look to work with those companies, because I mean, let's be real, there's a difference between registering in SAM and getting a certification.
Absolutely.
And being an established healthcare staffing firm. Can you kind of break that down a little bit for us? Like what's IA looking for?
Sure. So first, in order to partner, whether it's any company, right? I don't care if it's a large business or even another small business. You have to already be established. You have to already be in place. And within healthcare, some of those requirements are you need to have a payroll system, and especially when you're providing healthcare services to the federal government. So it's not a matter of, oh, I can find the people and pay everybody 1099. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You have to have a dedicated payroll system. You already have to have processes, policies, and procedures internally within your organization. And you have to have all of the insurance requirements, whether they're the 1 million, 3 million limit, or whether they're personal liability insurance or any type of insurance that's required under the federal government. Within healthcare, when we're staffing probably physicians and nurse practitioners, those higher levels, your company will have to hold malpractice insurance in many cases.
Oh, wow. And how can businesses, like, let's say I decide to, and this is very common. Let's say I've been working as a nurse for many, many years. I was a traveling nurse. And I'm suddenly, I want to start my own business. And I want to start staffing and providing nurses to other facilities. I get my EDWSB, I get all the certifications that I can, and I start building my business. How does someone like me, I'm just one or two people, and then maybe some part-time, traveling nurses on staff, on board, reach out to someone as big as you to build a relationship? That can be quite intimidating because you're part of like one of the largest healthcare staffing companies in the world, in the United States at the very least. So how does that look? How would I approach you? How do I even find you?
You can find all staffing agencies, all companies at every healthcare conference you go to. We are there, whether it's a company like ours or whether you're Lockheed Martin. We have to be out in the public, out there meeting folks and getting these small businesses to not only partner with us, but also sometimes help build them up so that they can begin to grow and establish that relationship. So the best place I always recommend, go to a conference, whether it's an in-person or virtual conference, be there. Have your information available. Have a very good capability statement that's specifically targeted to healthcare. I think sometimes I tend to meet at a lot of the conferences. We do what we call one-on-ones. So you get large businesses, we get these tables, and you have 15 minutes to sell your company. And I always advise people, sometimes if your company does a lot of things, you might want a couple of capabilities. Because if you hand me a capability statement and I see the majority of your NAICS codes are IT and you have a couple of healthcare, for me, I'm not sure that would be a good partnership. However, when I'm working with someone that sends me a capability statement that says, I have all the 621 NAICS codes, I have been staffing at my local hospital, I have been staffing at my local nursing home, you're who I want. I want to talk to you. I want to work with you.
That's actually a very good point. So let me kind of backtrack on something that you said. So the business, obviously small or not, must be established. You must already
Correct.
be performing this line of work. But back even further, you mentioned that you're looking for small business partners. And I want to be sure that the audience understands that there is a driving FAR clause behind that. And in the subcontracting plans, is it still 23% or has that changed? 23% to small businesses.
Correct.
Okay. So as a prime contractor, Aya Healthcare, in entering into this contract with the government, has promised to delegate 23% of their revenues to small business. And what's the revenue of Aya recently? Just curious.
Oh, I would be unable to even respond to that. We are massive.
Millions, possibly billions,
Billions.
23%. And we could go and totally look up the federal awards, but 23% of those federal awards, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of small businesses that you need to fill that roster. So what is that your responsibility solely?
It is the responsibility of not only internally within myself and the team that we established, it's for all of our companies. So to give people an example of what Ashley's talking about, recently the Department of Defense put out what we call MQS, and it's a version 2. MQS is an extremely large multiple award contract. It's an IDIQ with a ceiling value of, I think it's $47 billion over the course of 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it was broken up into the 2 segments. One was a large business segment and one was a small business segment. I think there was approximately 11 or 12 large businesses that were awarded that contract. Those businesses all have these small business requirements. And so going to these conferences and meeting and talking to them is vital because we are obligated and we are audited and we are questioned and we are required. And every year when it's option year renewal, we have to show that we are, if we haven't met the goal, why and when and what steps are we going to take to do that? So that's why it's critical to really be in front of these large businesses and to really ensure that you're selling yourself as I am a healthcare staffing agency.
That's great advice. Thank you. Do
Mhm.
you often notice that, and I know this is true in a lot of industries, particularly construction, but we're talking healthcare. Is it common for your subs to fall out of compliance over the course of a contract and you have to like quickly replace them with somebody else? What does that look like?
In previous roles that I've had, does it happen? Yes. The prime typically will do everything they can to help you maintain compliance, because I, as a prime, would not want to run back to the government and say, hey, I had to switch subcontractors and oh, I got to switch another one and another one. And that
Right.
is why it's so important when you're subbing, whether you're just doing a sub agreement, whether you're doing a CTA or even moving to a joint venture, that you know who you're partnering with and you understand and know their capabilities. If I partner with a small business and you've only staffed 4 or 5 people, I don't want to burden you by asking you to give me 15. So you really have to have a very strong and close relationship and understand who that small business is, what their capabilities are before you enter into that agreement into a large contract with the government.
That's a good point. The MPP is literally the equivalent of marriage. Like if you're going to do a mentor protege
I think you
program,
said that twice today, right?
I've had this conversation quite a few times this week, and it's funny that you mentioned that because
It's marriage.
it is. I have a
It
lot
is.
of newer small businesses that will ask, how do I find a prime, to be a mentor? And it's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. I mean, are there ways to determine eligible primes? Absolutely. Likely suspects? Sure, we can use the data. I'll help you with that. No problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more than just, hey, Tammy, nice to meet you. You want to be my mentor and let's enter into a 6-year agreement and you can funnel me
Yeah.
all your resources. So it is a trade-off, right? And you have to complement each other well, make sure that you work well together on projects that you're able to meet each other's needs. So I do agree with
You
that.
have to date each other.
Right.
Yes.
Date before.
And to the
You
ring.
date, it really is dating. You start courting. So I'm courting you at the conferences, and I'm at one conference, and then I see you at another, and then you're emailing, and we're exchanging, and I'm like, okay, and you're developing a relationship, and it's no different than the relationships you need to develop while you are marketing yourselves to the government. This really is not 100%, but it is strongly relationship driven, government contracting.
Very
Yeah.
much
And
so,
you
especially
have
when
to
you're
build
small.
that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
especially when you're small because, I always compared it to credit, right? Who's going to give you a chance when you don't have any track record and you don't have any history? And I feel like this is where folks like you come in, Tammy, because you are looking for the responsibility aspect, but you're also saying, hey, with some responsibility, we'll help lift you up, we'll help you grow.
Yeah.
So the onus and accountability isn't just on the prime to want to work with you guys, it's also on you. How you position yourself, how you communicate your value, how you market your company. If you are all over the place in your marketing materials, that's completely apparent. If you have chat GPT'd your capability statement, we can see that. Or your proposal.
Give me stories.
Yeah, Natasha and I talked about that earlier today.
I almost said unnecessary words.
And
Lie.
I was
I
gonna
will
say.
also tell people, oh yeah, that was a good conversation this afternoon. I'll also share something. If you're breaking into healthcare, you need revenue. You have to run payroll, and healthcare people are not cheap, and you have to run payroll. And while there are regulations that the government will pay small businesses early and on time, when you first start, your invoices 9 times out of 10 are going to be wrong. They're going to be incorrect, and you're going to have to fix them, and the payment's not going to come net 30. They're not going to come that day, So you have
Yeah.
to have revenue, because I promise you, these healthcare workers, the first day something's wrong with their check, you may not have staff report the next day. So you have to have revenue.
And not just that, I think like when you get into hiring people that have degrees and that have a certain skill set, they know their worth and their value. They don't want just good pay. Now we're talking fringe.
Mhm.
We're talking
Mhm.
unbillable stuff, right? We're
Yeah.
talking
How
about like,
many PTO days
what
do I
does my
get?
PTO look like? What is my sick leave? And that should be separated from my PTO. And I want to have like really good health insurance. And how much do you pay towards my health insurance?
Is
Mhm.
there a 401k?
Is there a 401k? And do you contribute? These are all things that might overwhelm you. And you're like, I'm just small. Well, you got to price that in, but not the full amount, only a certain percentage. That's what we call the fringe rate. But yeah, all of that stuff that you have to consider to maintain these people. That's part of
And
your scalability.
and you have to stay in your lane. If you are good at nursing and that's what you do is you provide nursing and you know nursing, stay with nursing.
Yeah.
Don't try to jump to physicians because now you're into a whole nother ball
Whole
game.
different level,
You
yeah.
can grow into that in healthcare, but start where you're good at. It can be CNAs. The government buys everything.
Literally everything.
Everything. I don't care if it's a CNA, a med tech, a phlebotomist. It does not matter. These, especially within the DoD, our military personnel need every service that we need from a health perspective. So that's
Right.
what we hire.
Beautifully said.
That is great information. Now, is there at any level of need in a company as large as yours for a small business who might provide employment placement, whereas they are the headhunter, the recruiter, but they're not necessarily bringing the um, the employee on as W-2, they're more or less handing off to you?
You know what? That's actually an awesome question. And here's what I tell people that are really focused on that. Your target audience is not going to be a large business. It's not going to be a Aya or a Luke and Associates, those large companies that dominate the healthcare field, because we all have recruiters. You know, we all have tons of recruiters, credentialers. If you're saying, hey, I can find the people, I don't want to cover the staff, I just want to be able to help you find the people and staff, that's where you focus on small businesses that already hold that particular contract. Because there are small businesses that hold contracts with various installations or various agencies that they may have 5 or 6 recruiters, but they have an extremely large contract and they have vacancies and they're willing to work with a company that can provide them the staff. They may pay you out per person. They may, you know, whatever negotiation you make with that company, but truly focus on small businesses with that because they're in need.
That's good advice. That's really good advice because, those of us who aren't in the healthcare industry at this capacity would have thought it would be just the opposite depending on demand. But that's a really good point. A large company is going to have those internal W-2s that they pay to do that job. So the
Mhm.
smalls are the ones that more than likely are going to need the help there. That's excellent advice. And I'm glad that I asked that question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Did you see
Um,
we're on fire on our comments here? Maybe we can answer some of those.
yeah, let's see what
Oh.
questions we have here. So Jane wants to know, are the VA government going to bill veterans private insurance? So if the VA provides care and let me make sure I understand, and Jane, come in and tell me if I'm wrong here. But if you're referring to if the VA is hiring someone like Aya to provide the healthcare staff, um, is the veterans private insurance going to be billed?
Great question. In healthcare staffing on the federal side, we don't deal with insurance at all. All I'm doing, whether it's the VA, DOD, Homeland Security, is providing the staff. Insurance is handled on another contract.
Okay, here's a follow-up. Let's see. I know some vets were hurt in war, and VA hospital will cover those illness per type and amount of disability. Will that stand, you think? Well, that's not really a question that I necessarily could answer.
Yeah.
I feel like I would almost need a crystal ball to answer that if it's going to stay that way or not. Now, I do
Yeah.
know the Department of Veteran Affairs does hire contractors to staff VA hospitals and
Mm-hmm.
the clinics that care for the veterans, whether it is here on US soil or overseas. A lot of those are contracted positions.
Yeah.
Correct.
Are the contract staff still going to be used by hospital, even if medical immigrants, Chinese or India or African doctors?
Interesting question. And the reason I say that is the following. There are certain FAR regulations in terms of U.S. citizenship when it comes into play for security clearances. So all of that is really contingent upon the clearance requirements within that particular organization.
Okay, that's a good answer. I would not have been able to answer that one. All right.
Okay.
Timothy asked, are there funding venues that assist service-connected disabled veteran-owned small businesses with startup capital to establish mental health, substance abuse, and suicide prevention counseling? That's a great question.
I
Yes, there
want to say there are. I
Mhm.
believe the SBA has special programs. I think the VA has special programs as well. I'm not familiar with them, but I'm almost positive I've seen them.
I will chime in on that one. There are a lot of grants that provide support on this. So that, you can get a lot of federal grants through HHS, and they provide a lot of support for if you're going to do, substance abuse, mental health, transitional housing, foster care, um, honestly, everything. So anything in that
Mm-hmm.
regard, there's grants for. So take a look at grants.gov. Like there's plenty for that. If you're going to be giving back, especially if you're an SDVOSB, so if you're giving back to your community, there's so much available to you to help fund and guide you and support your growth so that you can do that and be a vehicle for change. So absolutely.
Mm.
Now, he did say this is for service-connected veterans living overseas, not in U.S. territory. So the one thing that I can confirm there is while there would be funding programs available, in order to qualify as a SDVOSB under the Small Business Contracting Program, you do have to be a U.S. citizen. Now, none of the programs that we have talked about thus far require you to be a certified SDVOSB. However, in order to get that designation to bid on those set aside contracts, you would have to have the certification. In addition to that, if you are a US citizen and you have that certification, you are opened up to the Veteran Surplus Program, which may or may not be useful in healthcare other than maybe some office equipment. But, for those like construction industries, you've got your trucks and your forklifts and all the things that the government auctions off. Veterans kind of get first crack at that.
Yeah.
And Jane says, oh, my not deal with insurance, so must not have government vet grant coverage. I'm not necessarily, I'm not as keen to grants as I am contracts. So I would definitely check out grants.gov to see
Mm-hmm.
what type of grants there are in this industry that might be valid for you. An apartment complex for adult mentally ill residents, social workers live there too. So yes, Jane, I know that HUD does provide housing to various populations. I do know in part the VA does as well. So I would check USA Spending first, usaspending.gov. Type in housing, veteran housing, temporary residency, different keywords associated to that, and take a look at the agencies that are spending there. And that will definitely help you get closer to your answer. So
Absolutely.
that's all the comments we have so far. If anybody else who is watching has questions, comments, please pop them in the chat. We'll be happy to address them before we hop off of here, but we do have a few more minutes left. So, Natasha, do you have any additional questions for Tammy while we have her?
So how in the world, girl, tell me, how do
Okay.
you price and still keep it? And you don't have to tell me your secret sauce, right? But when you're pricing labor for such expensive individuals, how do you manage to stay competitive but still best value? You know,
Mm.
like you're still, how do you find that happy medium in the service industry? I think I find a lot of people that are like, well, some people want 120,000 and some people want 60,000. But what if I just hire the 60,000 person and I bid 120,000? Like, what does that look like, Tammy?
So, it's interesting. I always say I am a master of many trades, or what is it? I do a lot of things, but I'm not a master of none. So you always have to have
Yeah.
a pricing expert
Jack of
like
all, master of
Natasha.
none.
Yes, like Natasha and Ashley. Always have a pricing expert. But here's the key. And I'm sure there are a lot of my GovCon friends that are logged in today that will tell you, you really have to read the statement of work. In healthcare contracting, typically the government will ask us, they'll say, okay, in your statement of work, I need a nurse with 2 years experience. We'll accept an associate's degree, and we'll, all of the requirements. If you're pricing based on the nurses you may have that have 5 and 10 years experience, your pricing may not be as competitive as someone else, because a nurse that has 5 or 10 years experience is going to demand a higher rate than what the RFP and what the statement of work is telling you. So you really start there. So when my pricing people and I are working together, that's where I start. What does my statement of work say? And then I start doing my pricing research, and you go through all of, whatever means you have to come up with your salaries for the individuals that you're hiring. And then that's when you break into your margins, and you break into your overhead and your costs and your G&A. And that's where you as a company, you have to know what it's going to cost you to do what needs to be done based on the statement of work.
I love
So
that.
you pretty much have to create your project plan and reverse engineer it, essentially. Now, here's a question. How often, Tammy, do you at a take into consideration who you're going to be bidding against when you're pricing your stuff?
Ooh.
If I'm going to say an old saying that I'm sure you all know. If the first time you saw that RFP is when it dropped, I would probably recommend you leave it alone. And I say that for the following reason, especially in healthcare. I don't know any company that's not forecasting out to 28, 29, and even 30. We are watching this like a hawk because it is very competitive in healthcare. I mean, we all kind of know each other and everyone knows each other, but we know, okay, if I'm bidding on this physician job at Fort Sam Houston, who's the incumbent? What's the value of that contract? How have rates changed? So there's so much capture that goes into this. And I always say you have to be ready to just do homework all the time and figure out what these opportunities look like.
That's great advice. And I definitely hear a lot of mixed advice out there online in regards to what you need to know, whether you need capture or not. Relationships aren't important. If you see the bid, you win it. And I'm glad that you explained that in that way, because every industry is different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're out there and you're watching, and you're in government contracting and this is not applicable for your industry, consider yourself lucky. But it is in healthcare. It very much is in healthcare, because someday you're going to be the one bidding against Tammy's team. So if you're not looking ahead,
Good luck.
you know who your competition is now. So if you're not doing that
market research,
you know your competitors are. I mean, there's your answer.
And there are some, when I say strong small businesses out there who, I mean, they really are doing great work, and they're the folks that are going after those, we need 5 nurses here and 10 nurses here, even 2, but they understood that I'm going to start small. I'm going to master understanding not only how to bid, but once I'm awarded, how to execute, how to kick off that contract, and they learned step by step. And then you look at them now 10 years later, and they went from being a $7 million company or $2 million company to now they're worth, you know, 35 million, because they took those baby steps to learn this industry.
Right.
It is super important, and sometimes we learn the hard way. Like,
Mm.
we fumble through it. We think our government contracting is going to look like this, and in reality, it's kind of all over the place, and that is just the nature of this beast.
It
Yes.
is.
So we all have to start somewhere. If you're new, don't be deterred. I mean,
Don't.
it's today it's one nurse that you're staffing. Tomorrow it might be 100,000. That's a good question. How many healthcare providers would you say you guys have out there on the streets working right now?
Oh my. I as a whole, thousands.
Wow.
But when you're thinking about from a size standard of healthcare workers in the federal space, think of it this way. MQS2, and that's just one agency, Department of Defense, has said, we know we're going to spend $47 billion in the next 10 years just staffing in the United States in the territories. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Wow.
When you think about large bases, Portsmouth Naval Station, the world's largest Navy base, there are thousands, 10s, 20, 30,000 sailors there. All of them have to be seen, whether it's for mental health services or whether it's for orthopedic surgery. They all have to be seen. And all of those staff there, the majority of them are all contract staff.
Wow.
Very interesting. And you wouldn't know it, you know, if you were a
You never
soldier.
would.
You never would know, you know, how they're getting paid. And it doesn't essentially matter to you as the patient, but if you are a veteran, a lot of the healthcare providers that you see, even at the clinic, I believe, are
The
staffed.
majority. If you go to a CBOC, if you go to a VA hospital, the majority of the staff in that facility are hardworking, honest-serving government contractors.
That is awesome. You taught us a lot here today, Tammy.
Oh.
With all the information. We're going to have you back more often.
Mm.
Well, I'm encouraging everyone to go to New Orleans. These ladies will be there. We will be there. Sign up. We're going to be doing one-on-ones. I would love to speak and meet with people. We have a whole booth full of staff. I know these ladies are going to have a booth. So please, please, please go to the conference in New Orleans.
Yes, we will be there. That's going to be February 11th through 13th in NOLA. We will all be there. We will be broadcasting live for those of you who are sitting at home on the couch being bums. We're going to broadcast live our episode, and we're going to show you how much fun that we're having making new connections and building relationships. So
absolutely.
That's going to be super fun. It's still a ways away yet. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, I'm going to recommend that you don't wait. In 2023, I waited until January to try to get my ticket, and they were all sold out.
They were gone.
All sold out. So we're running up on that time again. If you haven't gotten your ticket, get it. Get your room. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to continue dropping them in the chat. We do try to answer best we can throughout the week as well. Mm-hmm. And until next week, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Tammy.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Nice meeting everyone.